Pack your things, Hadley. You have 2 weeks. My mother's words hit me like a slap across the face as I stood in the kitchen doorway, still holding the grocery bags I'd just carried in. The same kitchen where I'd made breakfast for this family every morning for the past 3 years while taking care of Grandma Melanie upstairs. My name is Hadley, and I'm 28 years old. I've been the invisible daughter in this house for as long as I can remember. What do you mean, pack my things? I set the bags down carefully, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. Dad looked up from his newspaper, not even bothering to make eye contact. We're selling the house, sweetheart. Cadence needs the money for her new apartment in the city, and, well, he shrugged like he was discussing the weather. It's time you figured things out on your own. Cadence bounced into the kitchen then, her blonde hair perfectly curled, designer purse slung over her shoulder. At 24, she'd never worked a day in her life, but somehow she was the one who deserved a financial head start. Oh, good. You told her. Cadence beamed at our parents. I already found the most amazing loft downtown. It has exposed brick and everything. The deposit alone is $15,000, but Daddy says that's no problem, right? Of course not, Princess. Dad folded his paper and smiled at her with the warmth he'd never once shown me. Your happiness is worth everything. I watched this exchange like I was viewing it through glass. 28 years of being the responsible one. 28 years of cleaning up their messes, taking care of Grandma when she got sick, working 2 jobs to help with household expenses while Cadence spent money on clothes and trips with friends. The realtor says we can close in 3 weeks, Mom chimed in, finally looking at me. The Sheltons are a lovely family. They have a teenage daughter who'll just love Grandma's old room. Grandma's room. The room where I'd spent countless hours reading to her, bringing her meals, helping her with her medications, while everyone else was too busy to care. The room where she'd died 6 months ago, holding my hand and whispering things I thought were just the ramblings of a dying woman. Where exactly am I supposed to go? I asked. Mom waved her hand dismissively. You're almost 30, Hadley. Surely you can figure out an apartment or something. Maybe get a roommate. With what money? I've been using my savings to help with Grandma's medical bills and the house expenses. That was your choice, Cadence said, examining her manicured nails. Nobody asked you to play martyr. The word martyr hung in the air like poison. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. I see. I picked up the grocery bags again. Well, I guess I better start looking for a place then. That's the spirit. Dad actually smiled at me for the first time in months. I knew you'd understand. Family has to stick together, and Cadence is just starting her life. I nodded and headed upstairs, my footsteps echoing in the hallway. Behind me, I could hear Cadence already on the phone with someone, squealing about her new apartment and how her parents were literally the best ever. In my room, the smallest bedroom in the house, the one I'd been given because Cadence needs more space for her things, I sat on my bed and stared at the wall. The same wall I'd stared at through countless nights of feeling invisible, unwanted, forgotten. But as I sat there, something Grandma had said came back to me. It was during one of her lucid moments near the end, when she'd gripped my hand with surprising strength. Always keep your own keys, darling, she'd whispered. Sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones you need protection from. I'd thought she was talking about door keys, maybe worried about me being locked out. But now, I walked to her old room, the one Mom had already started clearing out for the lovely Shelton family. In the corner sat Grandma's antique cedar chest, the one Mom had said I could keep, since no one else wants that old thing. I knelt beside it and lifted the heavy lid. Underneath her quilts and photo albums, my fingers found what I was looking for, a manila envelope with my name written in Grandma's careful script. For Hadley only. Inside was a letter and several official-looking documents. As I read, my hands began to shake. The house wasn't my parents' to sell. It never had been. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table reading Grandma's letter for the 5th time when Mom walked in wearing her bathrobe and that pinched expression she got when things weren't going her way. "You're up early," she said, eyeing the papers spread in front of me. "What's all that?" "Just some of Grandma's old documents." I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. "Thought I should go through everything before I move out." "Good. The sooner you get organized, the better." She poured herself coffee and sat across from me. "Cadence is coming by later to measure her new loft. She wants to make sure her furniture will fit." "How nice for her." Mom's eyes narrowed. "Don't use that tone with me, Hadley. We're doing what's best for this family." "Right. Of course you are." Before she could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from my friend Vivian. "Coffee in 20? You sounded weird on the phone last night." I stood up, gathering the papers. "I'm going out for a while." "Don't forget you have boxes to pack," Mom called after me. 20 minutes later, I slid into the booth across from Vivienne at our usual coffee shop. She took one look at my face and leaned forward. "Okay, spill. What did your family do now?" "They're kicking me out, selling the house to give Cadence money for her new apartment." Vivian's jaw dropped. "They're what? Hadley, you've been taking care of that house for years. You paid for half the repairs when the roof leaked. "I know." I pulled out the envelope. "But there's something else." I showed her Grandma's letter and the deed. Vivian read in silence, her eyes getting wider with each line. "Holy shit," she whispered. "Your grandmother left you the house? The whole house?" "Apparently she transferred ownership to me 2 years ago. Had it all done legally, notarized, filed with the county. My parents have no idea." "So they're trying to sell property they don't own. That's fraud, isn't it?" Vivian pulled out her phone. "My cousin Jake is a real estate lawyer. I'm calling him right now." While she made the call, I watched through the window as normal families walked by. Parents with kids, couples holding hands, people who probably didn't scheme against each other or throw family members out on the street. "Jake says you need to get to the county recorder's office today," Vivian said, hanging up. "Verify everything is properly filed. He also says—" She paused. "He says your parents could face serious legal consequences for this." Good. The word came out harder than I'd intended. Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Hadley, I get that you're angry, but do you? Do you really get it?" I leaned forward. "I spent 3 years caring for Grandma while they acted like she was a burden. I worked 2 jobs to help with expenses while Cadence got a brand new car for her birthday. I've been invisible in that house my entire life, and now they want to throw me out so their precious princess can have a loft with exposed brick. I know, but Grandma knew. She saw how they treated me, and she made sure I'd be okay. She left me the one thing that mattered most to her." Vivian was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to let them dig their own grave." We spent the next hour at the county office. The clerk, a tired-looking woman named Patricia, pulled up the records on her computer. "Yep, here it is. Property transferred to Hadley Thompson 2 years ago. All legal and proper." She looked at me over her glasses. "You're the sole owner, honey. Has been for a while now. What if someone tried to sell this property without my knowledge?" Patricia's expression darkened. "That would be fraud. Big-time fraud. You'd want to contact the police and probably a lawyer." Back at the house, I found Cadence in the living room with a measuring tape, talking loudly on her phone. "The couch will go perfectly by the windows," she was saying, "and I'm thinking of getting one of those fancy coffee machines for the kitchen, the kind that costs like $2,000. She noticed me and covered her phone. "Where have you been? Mom said you were supposed to be packing." "I was handling some business." "We'll handle it faster. The realtor is bringing the buyers by tomorrow for a final walkthrough." I nodded and headed upstairs. In my room, I pulled out my laptop and started researching tenant rights, property law, and fraud penalties. Every article I read made my resolve stronger. Around dinner time, Dad knocked on my door. "Hadley, can we talk?" I opened the door to find him standing there with an expression I'd never seen before, almost guilty. "I know this is hard," he said, "but you understand why we have to do this, right? Cadence has her whole life ahead of her." "And I don't? That's not what I meant. You're stronger than she is. You've always been able to take care of yourself." I stared at him for a long moment. "You're right, Dad. I am stronger than she is." He smiled, missing the edge in my voice completely. "I knew you'd understand." After he left, I sat on my bed and opened Grandma's letter one more time. At the bottom, in her shaky handwriting, she'd added a postscript. "Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people show the world who they really are." Tomorrow, they'd get their chance. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 a.m. I watched from the kitchen window as a silver SUV pulled into our driveway, followed by a sleek black sedan. "They're here!" Mom called out, her voice pitched high with excitement. She'd been up since 6, cleaning surfaces that were already spotless and arranging flowers she'd bought specifically for this walkthrough. The front door opened, and I heard Dad's booming voice. "Welcome, welcome! Come right in!" I stayed in the kitchen pretending to wash dishes while listening to the introductions. The Sheltons sounded exactly like the kind of family my parents would want to impress. Polite, well-spoken, financially secure. "This is our daughter Maeve," a woman's voice said. "She's 14 and absolutely loves the room upstairs. The one with the window seat?" "Grandma's room," Mom said warmly. "It gets the most beautiful morning light." My grip tightened on the plate I was washing. "And this is Weston, our agent," a man's voice added. "He's been handling everything for us." "Pleasure to meet you all," Dad said. "Let me give you the grand tour." They moved through the house like a parade, Mom and Dad pointing out features and upgrades while the Sheltons made appreciative noises. I could hear Cadence's voice chiming in occasionally, playing the role of helpful daughter. "The kitchen was just renovated 3 years ago," Mom was saying as they approached. "Hadley, come meet the Sheltons." I turned around, drying my hands on a towel. The family looked exactly as I'd imagined. Dad in a crisp polo shirt, Mom in designer jeans, teenage daughter with perfect teeth, and an expensive phone case. "This is our older daughter," Dad said, his tone notably cooler than when he'd introduced Cadence. "She's been helping us get ready for the move." "How nice," Mrs. Shelton said politely. "Are you excited about your family's new chapter?" "Absolutely thrilled," I replied, my voice perfectly neutral. The agent, Weston, was studying me with sharp eyes. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of calculating expression that came from years of reading people in high-stakes transactions. "Will you be moving with your family?" he asked. "Oh, no!" Cadence jumped in before I could answer. "Hadley's finally getting her own place. She's been living here way too long." She laughed like it was a joke, but there was an edge to it. The Sheltons looked uncomfortable. "Well," Mr. Shelton cleared his throat, "should we continue the tour?" They moved upstairs, and I followed at a distance. In Grandma's room, Mrs. Shelton was running her hands along the window seat, where Grandma used to sit and watch the birds. "This room has such character," she said. "Maeve, can you picture your desk right here by the window?" The teenage girl nodded enthusiastically. "It's perfect, Mom. Way better than my room at the old house." "The previous owner took excellent care of this space, Talal," Dad said. "My mother-in-law lived here for her final years. Very peaceful." I watched Weston examining the crown molding, the hardwood floors, the built-in bookshelves. His attention to detail was impressive. "The inspection went smoothly?" he asked Dad. "Clean as a whistle. No issues whatsoever." "And the title search?" "All clear. We've owned this house for 32 years. I felt a smile tug at the corner of my mouth. Weston caught it and frowned slightly. Back downstairs, the Sheltons gathered in the living room, while Weston pulled out a thick folder of documents. "Everything looks good," he said. "We're still on track for closing next Friday?" Absolutely, Dad said, shaking his hand firmly. We'll have everything ready. Wonderful, Mrs. Shelton beamed. Maeve, why don't you take some pictures for your friends? As the teenager started snapping photos, Cadence pulled out her own phone. This is so exciting, she said, starting to record a video. Last walkthrough before we sell the family home. It's bittersweet, but we're so ready for this new adventure. She panned the camera around the room, catching Mom wiping away a theatrical tear and Dad looking proud and paternal. Some people might think it's crazy to give up such a beautiful house, Cadence continued to her phone. But family comes first, right? Sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the people you love. I almost laughed out loud. After the Sheltons left, the house felt electric with anticipation. Mom immediately started calling relatives to share the news, while Dad poured himself a celebratory scotch, even though it wasn't even noon yet. I can't believe it's really happening, Cadence said, collapsing dramatically on the couch. I'm going to miss this place, but I'm so ready for my new life. You deserve it, sweetheart, Mom said, stroking her hair. You've worked so hard. I excused myself and went upstairs to make a phone call. Jake, it's Hadley, Vivian's friend. I need to move fast on that legal advice you gave me. What's the timeline? They're closing on Friday. That gives me 5 days. That's cutting it close, but doable. You'll need to file a restraining order against the sale and notify all parties involved. I can have the paperwork ready by tomorrow. Do it. Hadley, are you sure about this? Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back. Your family relationships will never be the same. I looked out the window at the garden where Grandma used to sit, where she'd taught me to plant roses and told me stories about her own difficult family. They made that choice when they decided to steal from me, I said. I'm just making sure they face the consequences. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and watching my parents buzz around like excited children on Christmas morning. The signing is at 2, Dad announced for the 3rd time, adjusting his tie. Weston said it should take about an hour, then we can celebrate. I still can't believe this is really happening, Mom said, checking her lipstick and her phone camera. 32 years in this house, and now we're giving Cadence the fresh start she deserves. Cadence bounced down the stairs in a designer dress I'd never seen before. I bought this specifically for today, she said, twirling. It's going to look amazing in all the photos. Photos? I asked. For my Instagram, obviously. This is like a major life moment. I'm going to document everything. She held up her phone, already recording. Good morning, beautiful people. Today's the day we officially sell the family home. I'm literally shaking with excitement. She panned the camera toward our parents, who waved enthusiastically. And there's my sister Hadley in the background, Cadence added, not bothering to include me in the frame. She's been super supportive through this whole process. I raised my coffee mug in a mock toast. At noon, I excused myself to run errands. Instead, I drove to Jake's law office downtown, where he handed me a manila envelope thick with legal documents. Everything's in order, he said. The restraining order against the sale, copies of the deed proving your ownership, and a cease and desist letter for your parents. The county clerk has been notified, and I've sent copies to the title company. What happens when they try to sign? The title company won't be able to proceed. They'll discover the property isn't legally your parents' to sell. Jake leaned back in his chair. Hadley, I have to ask one more time. Are you absolutely certain about this? They've had every opportunity to treat me like family. Instead, they chose to commit fraud. All right, then. The papers are served as of now. Good luck. I drove back home and parked across the street, watching through the living room window as my family prepared for their big moment. Dad was pacing, Mom was fussing with her hair, and Cadence was taking selfies on the couch. At 1:30, they piled into Dad's car, laughing and chattering like they were heading to a party. I waited until they disappeared around the corner, then went inside and called Vivian. It's done, I told her. They're walking into the signing right now with no idea what's waiting for them. How do you feel? Ask me in a few hours. I spent the afternoon cleaning Grandma's room, carefully dusting her photographs and organizing her books. At 4 p.m., my phone started ringing. Dad's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then Mom called. Voicemail. Cadence called 3 times in a row. Voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. Finally, I listened to Dad's message. Hadley, there's been some kind of mistake at the title company. They're saying there's a problem with the deed. Call me back immediately. Mom's message was more frantic. Hadley, where are you? We need you to come down here right now. Something's wrong with the paperwork. Cadence's messages got progressively more hysterical. Hadley, what the hell is going on? The lawyers are saying crazy things about ownership and fraud. This isn't funny anymore. Call me back. At 5 p.m., I heard Dad's car in the driveway. Car doors slammed, and then the front door burst open. Hadley! Dad's voice boomed through the house. Get down here right now. I walked downstairs to find all 3 of them standing in the living room, looking like they'd been through a tornado. Dad's tie was askew, Mom's makeup was smudged, and Cadence looked like she'd been crying. There you are, Mom said, her voice shaking. Where have you been? We've been trying to reach you for hours. I was out. What's wrong? You all look upset. Dad stepped forward, his face red with anger and confusion. The title company says there's a problem with the deed. They're claiming we don't own this house. That's ridiculous, I said calmly. Of course you own it. You've lived here for 32 years. That's what we told them, Cadence exploded. But they have all these documents saying the house belongs to you. It's completely insane. To me? I blinked innocently. That doesn't make any sense. The lawyers are saying Grandma transferred ownership to you 2 years ago, Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. They're saying the sale can't go through because we were trying to sell property that isn't ours. They used the word fraud, Dad added, sinking into his chair. They said we could face criminal charges. I looked at each of their faces, the confusion, the fear, the dawning realization that their perfect plan had just exploded in their faces. Well, I said, sitting down across from them, I suppose we should talk. I pulled out the manila envelope and set it on the coffee table. Grandma left me something before she died. I found it after you told me to pack my things. Dad reached for the envelope with trembling hands. As he read Grandma's letter, his face went from red to white to gray. She knew, he whispered. She knew what we were planning to do. Apparently, she knew you better than you knew yourselves, I said. Cadence grabbed the deed, scanning it frantically. This can't be legal. She was old, she was sick, she didn't know what she was doing. Actually, she had it done 2 years ago when she was perfectly lucid, all properly notarized and filed with the county. The room fell silent except for the sound of Mom's quiet sobbing. So, I continued, it looks like you just tried to sell my house. Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of a moving truck rumbling down our street. I looked out my bedroom window and watched it pull into our driveway, followed by the Shelton silver SUV. My phone had been buzzing all night with increasingly desperate messages from my family, but I'd turned it off around midnight. Now I powered it back on to find 17 missed calls and a string of texts that ranged from pleading to threatening. Dad, we need to fix this. Call me. Mom, Hadley, please. The Sheltons are expecting to move in today. We can work something out. Cadence, you're destroying my entire future. How can you be so selfish? I got dressed and walked downstairs to find my parents huddled at the kitchen table, looking like they hadn't slept. Empty coffee cups and crumpled tissues littered the surface. Thank God, Mom said when she saw me. We need to talk. I'm listening. Dad cleared his throat. The Sheltons are here. They've rented a truck, hired movers, the whole 9 yards. We need to figure out how to handle this. Handle what? Don't play dumb, Hadley, Cadence snapped, appearing in the doorway. Her designer dress from yesterday was wrinkled, and her perfect makeup was long gone. You know exactly what you've done. Through the window, I could see Weston talking animatedly on his phone while Mr. Shelton directed the movers toward the house. Mrs. Shelton and Maeve stood on the sidewalk looking confused. The doorbell rang. "I'll get it," I said, walking to the front door. Weston stood on the porch with the Sheltons, all of them wearing expressions that ranged from frustrated to furious. "Miss Thompson?" Weston's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "We need to discuss the situation with this property." "Of course. Please come in." I led them to the living room where my parents and Cadence were waiting. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Someone needs to explain what the hell is going on," Mr. Shelton said, his polite demeanor from yesterday completely gone. "We've spent thousands of dollars on this move, and now we're being told the sale is invalid?" Dad stood up, his hands shaking slightly. "There's been a misunderstanding about the ownership of the property. We're working to resolve it." "A misunderstanding?" Mrs. Shelton's voice pitched higher. "We have a signed contract. We've already given notice at our old house. Our daughter has told all her friends about her new school." Maeve, the 14-year-old, looked like she was about to cry. "Are we not moving into the house with the window seat?" "That's what we're trying to figure out, sweetheart," her mother said, shooting a venomous look at my parents. Weston pulled out his phone. "I've been in contact with the title company all morning. They've confirmed that the property legally belongs to Hadley Thompson, not Rebecca and Anthony Thompson. The sale cannot proceed." All eyes turned to me. I sat down in Grandma's favorite armchair, the one by the window where she used to watch the birds. "That's correct," I said calmly. "My grandmother transferred ownership to me 2 years ago. I have all the documentation." "But they signed a contract to sell," Mr. Shelton exploded. "They took our earnest money." "Actually," Weston said, checking his notes, "they signed a contract to sell property they don't legally own. That constitutes fraud." The word fraud hit the room like a bomb. Mom started crying again, and Dad sank back into his chair. "This is insane," Cadence said, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the police. This has to be illegal somehow." "Go ahead," I said. "I'm sure they'll be very interested in hearing about how you tried to sell someone else's house." Weston was typing rapidly on his phone. "My clients have grounds for a lawsuit. They've suffered significant financial damages due to this fraudulent sale." "Now wait just a minute," Dad said, finding his voice. "We had no idea the ownership had changed. This was an honest mistake." "An honest mistake?" Mrs. Shelton stood up, her face flushed with anger. "We trusted you people. We uprooted our entire lives based on your lies." "We weren't lying," Mom protested. "We lived here for 32 years. How were we supposed to know?" I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Actually, you did know." I handed the paper to Dad. It was a copy of the certified letter the county had sent 2 years ago, notifying the previous owners of record about the property transfer. "This was delivered to this address," I said. "Someone signed for it." Dad's face went white as he stared at the signature on the receipt. His own signature. "You knew," Weston said, his voice deadly quiet. "You knew the property had been transferred, and you tried to sell it anyway." The room erupted in chaos. The Sheltons started shouting about lawsuits and criminal charges. Cadence was screaming at me about ruining her life. Mom was sobbing into her hands. Through it all, I sat perfectly still in Grandma's chair, watching the family that had thrown me away finally face the consequences of their actions. "I want everyone out of my house," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. The room fell silent. "This is my property," I continued, standing up. "Mr. and Mrs. Shelton, I'm sorry you were deceived by my parents, but you need to leave. Weston, I suggest you contact your lawyer about pursuing damages from the people who actually committed fraud." I walked to the front door and opened it wide. "Everyone out! Now!" As the Sheltons filed past me, Mrs. Shelton paused. "I hope you're proud of yourself," she hissed. "You've destroyed a family's dreams." "No," I replied. I've just stopped letting mine be destroyed." The movers were already loading their truck back up, shaking their heads and muttering about crazy clients. Neighbors had started gathering on their porches, drawn by the commotion. My parents and Cadence stood in the doorway, looking lost and broken. "Where are we supposed to go?" Mom whispered. I looked at the three people who had spent my entire life making me feel unwanted and unwelcome. "I honestly don't care," I said, and closed the door. By Monday morning, my phone was ringing nonstop. The first call came from a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Hadley Thompson? This is Jennifer Martinez from Channel 7 News. We'd like to speak with you about the property fraud case involving your family." I hung up and immediately got another call. "Hadley Thompson? This is Brad from the morning show. We heard about your story and—" I turned off my phone and made coffee, but 20 minutes later, someone was knocking on my door. Through the peephole, I saw a woman with a microphone and a man with a camera. "Ms. Thompson, we're from Channel 12. Can we get a statement about the fraudulent house sale?" I didn't answer, but they didn't leave either. Soon, there were 3 news vans parked on my street, and neighbors were coming out to see what was happening. My phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. "Holy shit, you're on the news. Call me." I turned on the TV and flipped to the local news channel. There was my house on the screen, with a reporter standing on my front lawn. Xiao, what started as a routine home sale, has turned into a shocking case of family betrayal and property fraud. The Thompson family attempted to sell their home to give their younger daughter money for a new apartment, but they had one problem: they didn't actually own the house. The screen switched to footage of the Sheltons from Saturday, clearly filmed while they were loading their truck back up. "We trusted them completely," Mrs. Shelton was saying, tears streaming down her face. "We've lost our deposit, our moving costs, everything. Our daughter was supposed to start at her new school next week." Then Cadence appeared on screen, and I nearly choked on my coffee. She was standing in our driveway, makeup perfect, speaking directly to the camera, like she was giving an interview. "This whole thing is just a misunderstanding," she was saying. "My sister is going through a difficult time right now, and I think she's acting out of hurt feelings. We're a loving family, and we'll work through this together." The reporter's voice continued, "But legal documents show that the property was legally transferred to Hadley Thompson 2 years ago by her grandmother, and that her parents were notified of this transfer. The Shelton family has retained legal counsel and may pursue criminal charges." My doorbell rang again. This time it was my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, holding a casserole dish. "Honey, I brought you some dinner," she said, pushing past me into the kitchen. "I can't believe what those parents of yours tried to do." "Mrs. Patterson, you don't need to—" "Don't you Mrs. Patterson me. I've lived next door for 15 years, and I watched you take care of your grandmother while the rest of them acted like she was a burden." She set the casserole on the counter with a bang. "Your grandmother was a saint, and she knew exactly what she was doing when she left you this house." Before I could respond, my phone started ringing. This time it was Dad. "Hadley, you need to make this stop." "Make what stop?" "The reporters, the news stories, all of it. Cadence can't even leave her apartment without someone shoving a microphone in her face." Maybe she should have thought about that before she decided to document everything for social media. "This isn't a joke. Do you have any idea what this is doing to our family?" "Our family?" I laughed. "Dad, you threw me out of the house to give my inheritance to Cadence. What family? We can fix this. We can work something out. Just talk to the reporters. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding. You tried to steal my house." The line went quiet for a moment. Then, "Fine, but when the lawyers get involved, don't come crying to us." He hung up, and immediately my phone rang again. This time it was a number with the law firm's name on the caller ID. "Ms. Thompson, this is Patricia Wells from Wells, Martinez and Associates. We represent the Shelton family. We need to discuss your parents' fraudulent actions and the damages our clients have suffered." "I'm not responsible for what my parents did." We understand that. In fact, we'd like to discuss the possibility of you serving as a witness in our case against them. Are you available to meet this week? After I hung up, I sat in Grandma's chair and looked around the living room. The house felt different now, quieter, but also somehow lighter, like a weight had been lifted. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You ruined everything. I hope you're happy. C. Then another. The whole family is talking about what a vindictive bitch you are. C. And another. You'll never have anyone who loves you. You'll die alone in that house, just like Grandma did. C. I blocked the number and made myself a sandwich. As I was eating, someone knocked on the door again. This time it was Weston, the real estate agent, looking haggard and exhausted. Can I come in? I think we need to talk. I let him in, and he sat heavily on the couch. This whole thing has been a nightmare, he said. I've been selling houses for 12 years, and I've never seen anything like this. I'm sorry you got caught up in it. The Sheltons are talking about suing everyone, your parents, me, the title company. Their lawyer says they have a solid case for fraud damages. Good. My parents need to face consequences for what they did. Weston studied my face. You're not going to try to help them, are you? Why would I? Because they're your family. I looked at him for a long moment. Family doesn't try to steal from each other, Weston. Family doesn't throw you out on the street to benefit their favorite child. What my parents did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. He nodded slowly. The Sheltons asked me to give you this. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter from Mrs. Shelton, written in careful handwriting. Hadley. We don't blame you for what happened. We blame your parents for their deception. We hope you find peace in your grandmother's house. She must have loved you very much. The Shelton family. For the first time since this whole thing started, I felt tears prick my eyes. Tell them thank you, I said. After Weston left, I sat in the quiet house and realized something. For the first time in my life, I was completely alone, and I wasn't afraid. 3 weeks later, I sat in the courthouse waiting room, watching my parents huddle with their lawyer at the far end of the bench. Dad kept glancing at me with a mixture of anger and something that might have been regret. Mom hadn't looked at me once. Caden sat between them, scrolling through her phone with the kind of manic energy that came from desperation. Her Instagram had been flooded with comments after the story went viral, and not the kind she was used to receiving. Thompson versus Shelton, the bailiff called. Courtroom 3. We filed in like mourners at a funeral. The Sheltons sat with their lawyer on one side, my parents on the other. I was called as a witness, so I sat in the designated area, feeling like I was watching a play about someone else's life. Judge Martinez, a stern woman in her 50s, reviewed the case file with the kind of expression that suggested she'd seen every type of human stupidity imaginable. This is a civil case for damages resulting from fraudulent property sale, she announced. Mr. Patterson, you represent the plaintiffs? The Sheltons' lawyer stood up. Yes, Your Honor. My clients suffered significant financial damages when the defendants attempted to sell property they did not legally own. And Ms. Rodriguez, you represent the defendants? My parents' lawyer, a nervous-looking woman who kept shuffling papers, nodded. Yes, Your Honor. We maintain this was an honest mistake, not intentional fraud. Let's hear the evidence. For the next hour, I watched the case unfold like a slow-motion car crash. The Sheltons' lawyer presented the signed contract, the earnest money receipt, the moving expenses, the costs of temporary housing while they searched for a new home. Your Honor, he said, the defendants not only attempted to sell property they didn't own, but they did so knowing they weren't the legal owners. We have evidence that Mr. Thompson signed for the certified letter notifying him of the property transfer 2 years ago. He held up the receipt with Dad's signature. Dad's face went gray. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, The defendant's daughter posted videos on social media documenting their excitement about the sale proceeds, showing this was a deliberate attempt to profit from property that belonged to someone else. They played a clip from Cadence's Instagram story, the one where she talked about her new apartment and how her parents were literally the best ever for selling the house to fund her dreams. Cadence sank lower in her seat as her own words played back in the courtroom. When it was my parents' lawyer's turn, she stood up with visible reluctance. Your Honor, my clients lived in this house for 32 years. They had no reason to believe the ownership had changed. The transfer was done without their knowledge by an elderly woman who may not have fully understood the implications of her actions. Objection, the Sheltons' lawyer said immediately. The grandmother was evaluated by 2 doctors and found to be of sound mind when she executed the transfer. We have the medical records. Sustained, Judge Martinez said. Ms. Rodriguez, do you have any evidence that your clients were unaware of the ownership transfer? My parents' lawyer shuffled through her papers. Well, Your Honor, that is to say, I'll take that as a no. Ms. Thompson, please approach the witness stand. I walked to the front of the courtroom, feeling everyone's eyes on me. After being sworn in, the Sheltons' lawyer asked me to explain what had happened. My grandmother transferred the house to me 2 years ago, I said, my voice steady. She told me she wanted to make sure I was taken care of because she could see how my family treated me. Did your parents know about this transfer? Yes. The county sent a certified letter to the house. My father signed for it. What happened when your parents decided to sell the house? I looked directly at my parents as I answered. They told me I had 2 weeks to pack my things and move out. They said they were selling the house to give the money to my sister for her new apartment. Did they ask if you wanted to buy the house from them? No, they didn't even tell me they were planning to sell until after they'd already made the decision. Did they offer you any portion of the sale proceeds? No, they said it was all going to my sister. Cadence was crying now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage and humiliation. My parents' lawyer tried to cross-examine me, but there wasn't much she could do. The facts were the facts. Ms. Thompson, she said, don't you think your grandmother's decision to transfer the house without telling your parents was unfair? My grandmother spent her final years watching my parents treat me like I was invisible while they doted on my sister. She made her decision based on what she observed. But surely family should stick together. Family should stick together, I agreed. But my parents chose to throw me out of the house to benefit their favorite child. They made their choice about what family meant to them. When the testimony was over, Judge Martinez didn't need long to deliberate. The evidence is clear, she said. The defendants knowingly attempted to sell property they did not own, causing significant financial harm to the plaintiffs. I award the Shelton family $47,000 in damages, plus court costs. Dad's face went white. Mom started crying. Cadence looked like she was going to be sick. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for possible criminal prosecution. As we filed out of the courtroom, Mom finally looked at me. I hope you're satisfied, she said, her voice broken. You've destroyed your own family. No, I replied. You destroyed it when you decided to steal from me. I just made sure there were consequences. Outside the courthouse, the Sheltons' lawyer approached me. Ms. Thompson, my clients wanted me to thank you for your testimony. They know this couldn't have been easy. It was the right thing to do. There's one more thing, he said. Your parents don't have $47,000. They're going to have to sell assets, possibly declare bankruptcy. Are you prepared for that? I looked back at the courthouse steps, where my parents stood with their lawyer, looking defeated and lost. They made their choice, I said. Now they get to live with it. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday morning in December. I found it slipped under my door, along with a letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. Ms. Thompson, our clients, Rebecca and Anthony Thompson, are facing financial hardship due to recent legal judgments. They are requesting to rent the basement apartment in the property at... I set the letter aside and made coffee. Through the kitchen window, I could see Mrs. Patterson hanging Christmas lights on her porch. She waved when she spotted me, and I waved back. My phone rang. Dad's number. Hadley, did you get the letter? I got it. We're losing the apartment, the judgment, the legal fees. We can't make rent anymore. I waited for him to continue. The basement has its own entrance, he said, his voice carefully controlled. We wouldn't bother you. We'd pay rent, of course. Whatever you think is fair. How much can you afford? We were thinking maybe $200 a month? I almost laughed. The basement apartment could easily rent for $800 in this neighborhood. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up. That afternoon, Vivian came over with Chinese takeout and wine. So, she said, settling into Grandma's chair, are you going to let them move into the basement? I don't know. Part of me thinks they deserve to figure it out on their own. And the other part? The other part remembers that they're still my parents, even if they're terrible ones. Vivian opened the wine. What would your grandmother want you to do? I considered this while we ate. Grandma had been tough but fair. She'd never let anyone take advantage of her, but she'd also never kicked someone when they were down. She'd probably say that revenge is a dish best served cold, but mercy is what separates us from animals. Sounds like her. The next morning I called Dad back. You can rent the basement, I said, but there are conditions. Anything. Name it. First, it's $500 a month, not $200. That's still below market rate. Okay. Second, you pay first and last month's rent up front, plus a security deposit. No exceptions. We don't have that kind of money right now. Then you don't have an apartment right now. Figure it out. Hadley, please. Third, there's a lease. You break any terms, you're out immediately. No family discounts, no second chances. He was quiet for a long moment. What are the terms? No guests without permission. No loud music or TV after 10 p.m. You maintain the space and pay for any damages. And most importantly, I paused. You don't contact Cadence while you're living here. What? Why? Because I'm tired of listening to her poison you against me. If you want to live in my house, you don't get to plot with her about how terrible I am. She's our daughter, and I'm your daughter too. But you've spent the last 6 months letting her turn this whole situation into a social media campaign about what a monster I am. If you want my help, that stops now. Another long pause. Fine, we agree to your terms. I'll have the lease drawn up. They moved in on a Saturday. I watched from my kitchen window as they carried their belongings down the basement stairs, a few suitcases, some boxes, not much else. They'd lost almost everything in the judgment and bankruptcy. Mom knocked on my door that evening. I wanted to thank you, she said, not quite meeting my eyes, for letting us stay. You're welcome. I also wanted to... She took a shaky breath. I wanted to apologize for how we treated you, for what we tried to do. I studied her face. She looked older, more fragile than I remembered. I spent so many years thinking Cadence needed more help because she was less capable, she continued, but really, I think I just loved her more because she was easier to love, and that wasn't fair to you. No, it wasn't. I don't expect you to forgive us, but I want you to know that I see now what we did wrong. I nodded. Thank you for saying that. She started to leave, then turned back. Your grandmother would be proud of you, you know, the way you handled all this. You could have destroyed us completely, but you didn't. After she left, I sat in Grandma's chair and looked around the living room. The house felt different now, not empty exactly, but peaceful, like it had finally settled into what it was meant to be. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know you made Mom and Dad choose between us. You're a manipulative bitch, and I hope you rot in that house alone. See. I blocked the number and deleted the message. Outside, snow was starting to fall, dusting the garden where Grandma used to sit. I could hear the faint sound of the TV from the basement apartment, my parents settling into their new reality. This house had seen 3 generations of family drama, love, loss, and betrayal. But it had also seen forgiveness, second chances, and the kind of quiet strength that comes from knowing your own worth. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was home, and for the first time in my life, no one could take that away from me. The house was mine, and I was finally, truly free.